I feel paralyzed.
Hey guys, this is going to be a very opinionated video, but I've always kind of wondered to myself, what in the world is wrong with Frost DKs in PvP, especially in Miss? Why is every top DK unholy? The one Frost guy I saw, I looked, turned out to be unholy. Why has this not been changed for so long? And Kata, I don't remember looking at the ladders much in Kata, but I know for sure that many people just didn't want to play with a Frost DK, and I couldn't really blame them. I'm going to take you through some of the reasons I think Frost DKs suffer, especially in the current patches. The first thing I want to really talk about is the premise of a Frost DK versus an Unholy DK. Now, before we start, my opinions on Frost versus Unholy are kind of colored because I really hate the new talent system. I think it's somewhat stupid to give all DKs the ability to have Chillblains, that Lichborn no longer needs to be thought about before you spec into it. You know, it's not in the middle of the Frost tree, it's now just right there for you. The AMZ now both sucks, but is also not made for Unholy anymore. It just doesn't make much sense to me, but moving on. Frost DKs, if you haven't really played them, they're not that similar to Unholy DKs. They're the same class and all, but really they do damage in different ways. The most damage you normally do in Frost is by getting procs from something called Killing Machine. Basically, it's something that says when you white hit something, you have a chance to grant 100% critical strike chance to your next Obliterate or Frost Strike. Now, I'm not even going to get into the fact that this means you either just completely ignore a crit or you go just full blown on it. You stack in, you always want to crit. Killing Machine, dots, blah blah blah. If you look actually right now, the Unholy build that's popular uses a lot of crit and mastery, where in Frost, normally I personally definitely stack things like haste and mastery, but in PvE it's really weird. I mean, that alone kind of gives you an idea of what in the world were they thinking when they made Frost DKs the way they did. I mean, it's fun, it's really easy, but still. So, before I complain any more about them, one thing I really do like about Frost DKs is you get 2 death runes to start. This is really nice. I mean, I love Necrotic, that's really sweet. I mean, yeah, it doesn't do much damage. I'll get into that later, but it's nice that you get 2, essentially, whatever runes you need. In Kata, it used to be different because Necrotic Strikes costed Unholy runes, so you could actually spam 4 Necrotic Strikes and then just spam Howling Blast, which was a blast. So, that's one nice thing, but Frost DKs, they rely on that Killing Machine proc, and this is kind of where the problem number 1 starts for me, for PvP at least. Obliterate, it should kind of be the key focus, because it's powerful, you can't get around that. The thing is, if you're focusing on Obliterate, you want to use a 2-hander. If you're focusing on Killing Machine procs, you can tell yourself whatever you want, but theoretically, if you use 2 1-handers, you should proc more, especially if you stack haste. Now, the problem is, if you proc more with haste and 2 1-handers, then you lose mastery, and mastery is very important for one-handed DKs, and we get right back into that same problem. How do we spec? Do we use 2-handers? Do we use 1-handers? Do I want huge obliterates? Do I want bigger frost strikes? One thing about that is since Frost DKs, or all DKs, typically camp Blood Presence, it makes it a lot harder to spam those Frost Strikes because they cost 50. I mean, that's just the way it is. When you are in Frost Presence, they cost 20. It's much easier, you get your blood taps much better. But when you're in Blood Presence, it's much harder as a Frost DK to get those blood taps. It's not much easier as Unholy, but you do get 3 Death Coils per 100 runic power, which is nice. Now, as I was saying, with the two-handers versus one-handers, your obliterates are weaker with one-handers. Frost strikes are pretty strong with one-handers. It it's just different. But the other thing is also when you do have to spam necrotic strikes, you don't want to do 0 damage, and your two-hander will do more necrotic strike damage, and that can be important. But one thing about Frost is necrotic strike will not do that much damage, whereas obliterate, I mean, think about this. All right, I'll put dots up here. Necrotic strike, oh my Jesus, 46k. Obliterate, 188k. That's a big difference, and I mean, let's go until there we go. A 440k crit. The crit on the necrotic, about 80k. The problem is, if you don't necrotic strike them, there's no healing mitigation, they're gonna heal through it. If you obliterate them, sorry, if you do necrotic strike them, you're doing 40k damage unless your partner is putting out a lot of damage or they are insanely low on health. It's really not gonna help you that much. But see, as Unholy, and this also counts with Soul Reaper, as you can see, it does shadow damage while I'm in Frostspec. As Unholy, you're actually allowed to spam necrotic strikes for reasonable damage. Yeah, it's not great damage, but it is better. You have the dots that benefit a lot in Unholy. You do a lot more dot damage. And your Soul Reaper does shadow damage. You don't even get a benefit from Soul Reaper while you're in Frost. You can use it, it's great. I mean, it'll do good damage, but it's not going to get the 170k crits that Unholy gets. I mean, that's just crazy. You can't really get around the fact that if a Paladin is at 25% and he dies in or dies in the Soul Reaper, he didn't bubble because he didn't have to, didn't dispel it. That's awesome. In Frost, that's probably not going to happen. Another big flaw that I see in Frost is, before I go on, I'll explain this term. Lacing, maybe it's not a WoW term, it was used on Diablo 2. Lacing is the idea of just playing very defensively. You know, running around, oh, I'm going to cast my Chains of Ice, I'm going to spam conversion, I'm going to heal up a little, yeah, look at me go. The problem is, when you're in Frost, you don't really do that much damage from your dots. When you're in Unholy, you do dot damage and you do pet damage, and it's typically just easier to lates because you have your death coils as well, which do, you know, pretty decent damage. When you're lating in Frost, it's pretty much to be a dick. When you're lating Unholy, you actually do damage, you get yourself out of trouble. It's just another thing to think about. Now, my next thing is the talent choices. Okay, Roiling Blood, pretty much a staple for an Unholy DK. In Frost, not so much. Your dot damage doesn't do quite as much. Plague Leech is very nice, but one bad thing about it is it's more micromanaging, and Frost does not require much management, but if you're playing Frost, there's a really good chance that you actually like the fact that there's not much management. You don't want any more managing. Unholy Blight is actually pretty cool. It can help you get stealthies out of, well, stealth, but the problem is it's only really awesome if you have Chillblains too. So if you don't pick Chillblains, you lose that slow. If you do big Chillblains, you get that slow, you don't get that stun, which brings me to that Asphyxiate. And Frost, God forbid, this is my PvE spec, if you use Remorseless Winter in PvP, you should just stop. I mean, you have Monks with Tiger's Lust, DKs can AMS it, not to mention they have like 5,000 trinkets. Priests can dispel it from themselves, they can get out of it really easy, Warriors can leap out of it, and Paladins can Hand of Freedom out of it. Really, there's not ever a great reason to use Remorseless Winter over Desecrated Ground or Gorfian's Grasp if you're doing 5s or RPGs or whatever. But past that, you don't really have any other CC except for Strangulate, which is really good, but you don't have a stun. The stun can be really nice. The stun keeps your target in place, but the stun can also be used on your off target. It's a 30-second stun, it's free, it's 5 seconds long, it's pretty great. And it's physical, you can't be dispelled. But you pick that stun, you lose that slow, you lose that slow, Unholy Blight's worse, Unholy Blight's worse, you might as well win Plague Leech. Plague Leech is more managing, and not to mention with Plague Leech and Frost, you have to use 2 runes, unless you have Outbreak, to reapply your dots. In Unholy, you just have to Plague Strike them, and that applies both dots for you. So, it's just kind of how it is. Now, my last thing is pretty obvious. At least my last biggest complaint, the fact that your pet, look at him, he's so almost useful. You're completely losing him in WoD too. if you don't go into Unholy, your pet doesn't have his attacks, so he doesn't have the stun, and that's a pretty big stun when he's in his empowered mode. When he's empowered, he also has a charge that silences and roots for 2 seconds. It's not silence; it's an interrupt, but a 2 second interrupt slash silence, really nice for catching up to people. Requires a little more micromanaging, but honestly, if you're playing Unholy, then you need to know that you will have to micromanage a little more, and you should honestly be rewarded for that. So I'm totally fine with the fact that Unholy gets a few benefits. But the fact is, Frost doesn't have any of these benefits. I really don't understand why. I'd love to kind of like get your guys' opinions on this, because I've always kind of wondered, why is Frost like this? Why does pretty much every good player believe that Frost is just not that good? I like seeing it for carries. I use Frost for carries for fun every now and then, but it's really about it. So, this isn't a comprehensive list of everything wrong with Frost. I'm sure there's stuff that I said that maybe you don't agree with, and at the same time, I'm sure you can think of a lot more things. But these are kind of my biggest complaints. Some of it will be changing in the next expansion, which is nice, but these are my primary reasons why I think Frost DKs are just subpar in PvP. And like I said, I'm not the only one. If there's anything I missed that's pretty big, you can message me. If you'd like to give me an idea of maybe my next WoW rant, you can send that to me. Not really sure what you guys want to hear, but I was just sitting here thinking, man, do I not like playing Frost in PvP anymore? So I figured, why not? I'll share my 2 cents with you guys, and if you liked it, that's awesome. Speaking of which, if you like our stuff, go ahead and subscribe to our channel. If you don't like our stuff, probably shouldn't subscribe to our channel, unless you really want it. That's fine with me. You can go to our channel, check out our site, our Facebook, our Twitter. We're pretty small. I'm just pumping out a lot of videos so that we can try and get some people watching, but whatever turns you on. And hope to see you guys back.